Hi, my dear Astro family. Today I wanted to make a video about retrograde planets. One of the reasons is because I think retrograde planets are misunderstood, and probably it's time to speak about them a little bit. And I decided to speak about the retrograde planets through Zelensky's chart. Now, retrograde planets are very much feared in modern astrology, and people tend to believe that their life is doomed because they have got few retrograde planets, and that's not necessarily the case. Now, I wanted to emphasize that I chose Zelensky's chart because he has got four retrograde planets, but I would like you to refrain yourself from any type of political comments. This is not the channel where it should be happening. And the reason why I chose his chart, because it's relevant on one hand. Secondly, it is a brilliant chart to talk about. So I do believe that we astrologers have to kind of stay away from political matters, in the sense that we shouldn't be taking sides. We just should be focusing on the meaning of the planets and their messages. So my intention with this video is actually to give you a message about the retrograde planets, as well as to teach you how to deal with the retrograde planets so you can have a better understanding. And thirdly, we might just want to be learning a little bit through Zelensky's chart, how to interpret a chart so that you can do your own. By the way, I am going to be making a webinar on the most important planet of your chart and how to see that. So if you are interested, then you might want to be checking that out. And don't forget that till the 20th, all my readings are on 30% discount, and all my webinars and courses are on 50% discount. So you might want to be grabbing your opportunity. But let's just have a look at the retrograde planets first before we actually jump onto his chart. So retrograde planets actually indicate that, retrograde planets are a planet which is actually, it looks like it's moving backward, but it's only from the Earth perspective. So therefore, it is not entirely true. It's just our perspective. Now, how you should imagine the retrograde planets is like the athletic sport. So basically, there are all the circles, and then there are runners in the inner circle, there are runners at the outer circle. And of course, it might look like that the outer circle has to be running more, but actually that's not the case. So when there is a retrograde planet, exactly the same situation here too. But the retrograde planet would be the one who is running on the outer circle. And the inner planets, the inner circle would be representing the planets in direct motion. Now, when we are talking about retrograde planets, one of the meaning which I would like you to think about, especially in regards to your own chart, is that something which looks like it's moving backward, but actually it doesn't. So it does bring in the topic of reality and the pretense. What does that exactly mean? As I said, retrograde planet looks like they are moving backwards, but it is not. So anyone who has got retrograde planets has got the tendency to try to show something from themselves, but actually that's not the case. So for instance, maybe you have got a Venus retrograde, and then you want to show that you are not lovable or you are not affectionate. There is a reason for that. Let's say Venus in Capricorn. But actually, it really shows how affectionate and caring and loving you are. But you kind of had some early childhood experiences, which is actually taught you to kind of stop showing how affectionate you can be. So that's exactly what I mean by reality versus the pretentious part of that planet. So an individual or an individual level, a retrograde planet always indicates that we have created something for ourselves because we don't want to get hurt. Usually the reality is different, what we actually show or what actually we see from another person or even from ourselves. So something to do with a subconscious coping mechanism, what retrograde planets actually showing to us. Yes, if you start Googling or reading some traditional literature, then you're going to see something to do with karmic wounds, something that we need to repeat, as in previous lives we have not mastered those skills yet. So we are back here to actually learn more about them. And that's probably to a certain extent true. But for instance, someone who has got like Mercury in Capricorn, we have to be actually staying real in a sense that does karma exist? Do we actually repeat our lives? It might not be acceptable for everyone. So we need examples from our lives as well. So I believe that a retrograde planet kind of indicates that in early childhood, we had to really learn about those retrograde planets very quickly. But then at one point of our life, we are going to slow down with that topic. And then we're going to have to revisit these topics and we're going to have to relearn them. So imagine, for instance, that Venus is retrograde in your chart. It might actually indicate that someone who got married at a very early age, and unfortunately later on that marriage did not necessarily work out. So maybe it brings up a divorce. And then I'm going to have to recalibrate everything around what I know about love and connecting with others and comforting others, and as well as comforting myself. Or so kind of like with the retrograde planets, there is always a little bit of a false belief system going on. So imagine, for instance, a Jupiter retrograde energy. I believe that what I do is actually right, or I have got a belief system what I'm meant to be doing, but I might be doing actually the opposite, or the other way around. I don't know what would be right, but I still do it anyway. So there is a little bit of a rebellious quality to the retrograde planets. But also what I've noticed with retrograde motions, that they tend to be actually overworking. We tend to be overdoing those energies. And why is that? Now, think about that. Basically, we've got a planet. At one point, it's direct, and this is the planet. And then it's moving forward, and it's going to come here, right? But then it decides that it's going to go backwards. So what happens is that you kind of learn about the same process. It's like taking the same exam 2 or 3 times. And of course, it's kind of like overdoing that energy. Or imagine that you are actually walking on the same street twice or even 3 times, or in some instances, the planet actually can go retrograde on the same degrees at least 5 times. But those are the outer planets. So retrograde energy is kind of like almost being in the finish line, and then all of a sudden I turn backwards. And the question is, why do you have to turn backwards? And probably it is kind of indicating that we are afraid of something. We don't want to be tapping into the new territory. So therefore, it's more comfortable for us to kind of walk backwards. So with the retrograde planets, there is always an element of a hesitation, because the unfamiliar things actually scare us somehow. And typically, the retrograde planets actually go backwards because they are expecting help from other planets. So they need more experiences, they need more help from someone. So the more retrograde planets someone has, the more help actually they need from the society, from friends, from family, to somehow support them. Sometimes it is emotional support, sometimes it is financial support, doesn't really matter, but they tend to be leaning on someone else. And think about the retrograde planet, because of course, at one point in our lives, they are going to go direct, but they are going to be very slow. So the slowness of a planet kind of indicates that it is kind of like a little bit cautious. It doesn't want to rush because, but I don't want to make the same mistake twice. So I'd rather walk very, very slowly, and then eventually the planet speeds up. So maybe that slow period also indicates that I'm still actually counting on something, or I'm hoping that something will happen, or something will change my life, or someone is going to pop around and actually help me out. So typically the retrograde planets have got self-doubt issues. And the fact that the retrograde planets walk the same path a few times, it kind of indicates how frustrated the person can become, because I'm going to be seeing similar things all the time. Or maybe I kind of feel like I don't have the knowledge, something which I'm not aware of, or clearly I don't want to be seeing something which is right in front of my nose. So yes, the retrograde planets does talk about that we have to be repeating a task because we have to master something there in regards to that planetary influence, whatever it is actually talking about. Now, the fact that the retrograde planets are actual optical illusions, in many cases, the more retrograde planets we have, the more problem we can have with our eyesight as well. So I'm going to speak about a little bit about the statistics as well in regards to retrograde, but I've experienced eyesight problems quite often with retrograde planets. And it might not be just one or two retrograde, but maybe those who have got 4, 5, or 6 retrograde planets in their chart. Now, retrograde planets needs to be interpreted in different ways in natal chart as well as in horary chart, or even an actual astrology. But what you might want to consider is that, imagine that you have got Venus applying a conjunction to Jupiter. Let's say Venus is on, I don't know, 20 degree of Aquarius and Jupiter is on 25 degree of Aquarius. And what Venus does is it's moving forward slowly but surely, and it's almost reaching Jupiter. Let's say Jupiter rules the 7th house. So Venus is kind of like ready to fall in love and go big. But then in the very last minute, Venus decides on 24 degree that it turns around and moves backwards. So it's kind of like a situation where, let's say Venus wants to be jumping out of a marriage, it wants to meet someone else, and then it chickens out in the very last minute, and then it goes back to that abusive relationship, whatever they had before. So this is how you should imagine retrograde planets, where I almost do something, but in the very last minute, I tend to be actually jumping out of that situation. Or there are different types of retrograde energies, by the way. This is what we call as applications in astrology. There is a situation, for instance, where, for instance, imagine that Venus is on 20 degree, Jupiter is on 25 degree, and the moon is on 15 degree. And Venus is walking towards Jupiter because it wants to meet that big energy there. But all of a sudden, moon comes around and then takes the whole thing away. So it can actually, again, indicate a situation where I almost got married, but the moon comes into the picture, kind of like causing a wedge there. Or it might be a different planet. So for instance, imagine a situation where, I don't know, you are in front of you are at your wedding ceremony, and then right before you say yes to your partner, all of a sudden a third party is coming into the picture. No, these two cannot get married because that baby is mine, for instance. And that's kind of like a moon energy. So there are different type of retrogrades, and we do need to be interpreting them a little bit in a different way though. But today's intention is not necessarily going through all these type of applications. There are quite few of them. So I would say that the retrograde planets has got at least 8 types, and we do need to be looking at them differently. So some of the keywords which you might want to be remembering with retrogrades, and there is the prefix word you might want to be remembering, and that's the remember, research, revisit, rethink, reconfirm something, review, resting a little bit, because retrograde planets kind of move backwards. So it's kind of like moving away from a situation and then kind of like looking at a bigger picture rather than being so close by that maybe I'm not able to see something very important, which is right in front of my nose. So kind of retrograde planets indicates that we need to sleep on something. By the way, too many retrograde planets also can indicate that someone might have got sleeping problems, or they just love sleeping overall. Also, some other keywords with retrograde energies are recharging or just retreat a little bit. So when a planet appears to move backwards, this is kind of like a celestial second chance to revisit old grounds and kind of like retracing your steps a little bit so that you can put your life back on track. It is a time when we should be noticing slip-ups or correcting mistakes, or maybe we just kind of need to be maintaining a healthy distance overall too in a situation. But also you're meant to be reflecting on certain type of things, why they are happening. So we tend to say that retrograde energies are an internal type of energy. Yes, we need to look into ourselves to kind of find the root cause of the problem. Revisiting opinions, checking something, re-exploring certain type of territories. But it also talks about a little bit of a cosmic cleanup as well, kind of like a little bit of a maintenance work. All these are retrograde keywords. Now, what I've noticed with retrograde planets that, as I said, apart from the outer planets, though, I'm going to come on to that. But the retrograde planets tend to get fully engaged at an early age, maybe way too early, actually. So the retrograde planets tends to mature or become self-aware at a very young age. And then after somehow our life is on hold for some reason, because we are kind of like receiving a second chance to explore or benefit from that planet's potentials. So for instance, imagine that, I don't know, a famous person has got 5 retrograde planets, and they become very famous at a young age. Now, in many cases, what happens is that later on, they are going to vanish, and they might get into trouble of not being able to figure out what the heck they want to do with their life. And they are really trying to get back on track with, for instance, a new acting role. Or maybe they disappear for 20 years and then they come out with a new song, and you know, they try to raise awareness about how good they are. Sometimes retrograde planets take decisions a little bit too late because there is this procrastination energy around it. So let's have a look at, for instance, Venus, because that was our initial example. Venus could kind of indicate that at an early age, we had some Venusian experiences, such as getting married or finding, you know, a twin flame, or having money problems, or having plenty of money. It depends on how strong that Venus would be. But then later in life, we're going to have to somehow mature about it, or we're going to have to lose every single penny so that we realize how important money has become for us, or the fact that we've chosen money over love, or the other way around. Now, one of the reasons why I would be emphasizing on inner planets rather than outer planets, because from a statistic point of view, Saturn is retrograde for 36.5% of its cycle. So it means that plenty of people do have Saturn retrograde. But when we are looking at the outer planets, such as Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they are retrograde 50% of their time. So therefore, those are not so prominent overall. But if you have got Mars, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, or even Saturn retrograde, those are quite actually important. Sun and Moon are never retrograde. The North Node and the South Node, 97% of the times are actually retrograde. So with the nodes, I would be mainly focusing on when they are not retrograde in your chart. So, but for instance, looking at Saturn retrograde, it could really indicate that we had to take on some burdens or parental responsibilities early in life. And we just had to be waiting to somehow start achieving our ambitions, for instance. So there is an element of, or it could actually indicate kind of like a lack of authority figure in the early childhood as well, or the lack of parental figure overall, which is kind of slowed us down when it comes to our personal development. Something to do with a hard lesson had to be learned at a young age. But then later on, we receive a new way of dealing with these situations. Now, the retrograde planets, they become more important, or they tend to be taken on a greater importance when they are placed in a key position in your chart. For instance, being in an angular house, or it's a singleton planet, or it's the handle of the bucket, and so forth. And these are actually the type of stuff which I'm going to be teaching you at the weekend about these, which is the most important planet in your chart. So if they are, if they are, for instance, in the third house, they are a little bit less important than, for instance, in the angular house. But I'm going to teach you all about that at the weekend, because not every planet is as important as we might think. Now, from a statistics point of view, there was this guy called Neil Michelson, and then he made statistics about retrograde planets, and he realized that 14% of the people born in the 20th century actually have 4 retrograde planets. 5% have 5, and 1% only have 6 retrograde planets. So therefore, having 5 or 6 are quite rare, and those people tend to say that they had some type of initial talent at an early age, but then somehow they had to settle for real life later on. So maybe, as I said, they got rich from something at an early age, but then after they had to stop working, for instance, because they had to be looking after their parents, or they became moms, or they got married, and all those type of things. Retrograde planets actually can indicate some inherited issues as well. And we might be here to actually work on something which our ancestors were not able to. So it's kind of like a second chance in the family history to explore and establish some issues which the generations have been going on for a while. So in traditional astrology, actually, we tend to say that the retrograde planets makes it's actually 25% weaker. Some Asian textbook says that if a malefic is retrograde, then it's actually more malefic. And if it's a benefic planet, then it becomes more benefic. Whether it's entirely true or not, nowadays at least, I'm not 100% sure about it. But sure, I mean, there is a reason for them to say that, and there is some truth to it. However, I'm not too sure if it's 100% accurate nowadays. Back in the days, probably it was a lot more true, though. Now, looking at Zelenskyy's chart, who, by the way, is or was a humorist and an actor, and he graduated in law school, and then since 2019, he is the president of Ukraine. So as I mentioned, I picked his chart because it can be quite fascinating to learn from his chart, but no, I don't wish to have any type of political bias, or I don't wish to have any political disagreement about it. So please refrain yourself from it. Now, what you can see in his chart is actually he has got 4 retrograde planets. Jupiter is quite close to the ascendant. Mars is retrograde in the sign of Leo, and it's on 0 degree as well. And he also has got Saturn and Pluto in a retrograde motion also. So as I said, the personal planets are always the most important ones. So we might want to be looking at actually Mars a little bit. Now, what does Mars represent? Mars is our willpower, our desire, our initiation skills, but also it talks about our sexuality as well to a certain extent. So as I said, with retrograde planets, we tend to overdo things, or we are trying to portray something that we actually not. So Mars in Leo in the 3rd house could show that we want to look stronger than we are, or we want to be a little bit more forceful when it comes to communication than actually we can manage. Mars kind of shows how we handle conflicts and how we maintain what is our anger management like. So it kind of could show actually that he might be a little bit of a passive aggressive type of person. Retrograde planets, it's not about portraying strength. It's actually kind of like the karmic duty here is to learn to make a peace with someone. Because in previous lifetimes, he might have been very stubborn, or somehow he experienced violence, or actually he portrayed violence. And this time around, he should not be portraying violence. He might have had to experience all these at an early age, and then now he has to revisit this topic, learning from it. So retrograde Mars, I also said that retrograde planets tend to be overdoing something. So retrograde Mars in many cases feels that they have to constantly do something. Otherwise, they are not going to be appreciated, Leo, or they are not going to be looked up on, or they are not going to be cheered for. So there is that kind of like subconscious motivation to be admired, but also I tend to be acting out, especially in the sign of Leo, because this Mars is a little bit of an attention seeker. Mars is in fighting, Leo is in attention. So I am fighting for attention. Now, this is something which he might have received at a young age, or he does that because he did not receive the attention as much as he wanted to. Kind of like no one paid attention to him. It's very possible that he was bullied at school. Mars in the 3rd house. Mars represents your survival instinct. So I had to somehow stand out, and therefore I had to do certain type of Marsian things so that I am not going to get bullied at school. This could be one of the ways how we can actually go about that Mars. Or it could actually show, because Leo is a leadership sign, Mars is actually kind of like an entrepreneur. So it could really show that he wants power because he never had that power, what he wanted, or he might have experienced what it is like to have power at an early age. But then at one point, it's going to slow down, and I have to be kind of finding a new field to be powerful at. So in many cases, Mars retrograde actually changes career at one point. And it could be quite a shocking change as well to a certain extent. Because remember, Mars gets up every single morning to become Capricorn. That's the exalted ruler of Capricorn. So Mars does carry some of our career aspirations overall. What motivates us? So, but also, this Mars in the 3rd house kind of can show that, you know what, he can really ask the right questions, or he can really create tensions between others by just simply saying something out loud. So there is a provoking quality to Mars in the 3rd house. And as I said, retrograde planets tend to be overdoing things. So, but also the primary need of Mars might be about, I have to be defending myself, and then I have to say something out loud all the time. So kind of like this retrograde Mars in the third, which is really much showing our early environment, something was missing there. It's probably we should be reading up about his life a little bit so that we can get clear picture of what it might be. But third house is very much about asking questions. It's about our studies. So this Mars, who is actually a strategist at one point, can be very analytical. So he might ask questions, or he might actually ask for help if he's not proud, too proud, right? Then he asks for help. But even when he gets help, or he gets some type of information, he might not be satisfied with it. And what his brain is doing, third house, that, you know what, no one wants to help me. I'm on my own. And, you know, I have to be doing what is right for me. So in that case, it's worth having a look at Mars aspects, because those are help somehow. Even the hard aspects are help in a sense. So you can see that in his chart, there is actually an opposition going on between Mars and Sun and Venus. So Sun wants to help, which could actually kind of like the ruler of the third house. So this could show some type of reassurance about his communication skills. But from a essential meaning point of view, Sun kind of shows the hierarchy figures. So this could talk about politicians. So there is someone who kind of wants to advise, because it's a ninth house, it's an advisory house. There is someone there who wants to advise, but he might not be listening to them, and that might be creating some type of conflict, because if I say something to that Mars, he might feel that I'm attacking them. So there, and remember, there is the psychological defense mechanism here that I have to be standing up for myself. Or there is Venus there, which is kind of like providing assets or even financial help or negotiation skills, right? Or just negotiators overall. But he might take it also offensive because he feels that his pride is getting hurt. So the reaction of that Mars could be a little bit wrongly wired, basically. And that's what the retrograde energy would show. Now, you can see in his chart, by the way, that he has got plenty of fixed energy going on. And fixed energy somehow represents the desire for security and durability. Whatever he does, probably somehow stability motivates him. Maybe he wants to kind of play this loyal, obstinate, and hardworking role rather than trying to learn new experiences. So he might want structure, structure and strengthening everything. Fixed energy can be quite stubborn, but the fact that Mars is in the third house, it kind of shows that he needs to learn a little bit flexibility also, because what is interesting also in his chart, that mostly his most active houses are the mutable, the Cadent houses. And the Cadent houses are about communication, mobility. It's about, and also his air elements are the most dominant one as well. So something to do with communication, short trips, travels, ideas, flexibility, adaptability. Those are something which he does need to learn about. So in many cases, Mars retrograde, for instance, can indicate that I start doing something and then at one point I'm going to be making a radical change. And I'm gonna, I don't know, change my career. I'm going to be, I don't know, getting married to someone else. Also dependent on what Mars actually rules in your chart. So you can see all these Cadent energies, the 6th, 9th, 3rd, and the 12th house. which could actually indicate great skills for communication, the need to learn about adaptability. But the more Kedan planets we've got, because the problem with the Kedan house is that they fall from power. So the planets don't have as much power there to kind of show their ability. That's why they need to be flexible. They need to kind of shift from one field to another, kind of like testing the water, what actually works for me and what does not work for me. By the way, his most important planet, because I did mention that I'm going to be making a webinar about that, is actually the moon here. And it does show that he is a receptive, imaginative nature. It does show that he has got the ability to instinctively absorb the atmosphere and the impression of others. And this is the planet of popularity as well, especially in the sign of Leo. So popularity and fame are definitely there, but also it could show how he can fall out of self-control, because moon is a shapeshifter. It changes quite a lot. So if the moon is the most important planet, sometimes moon is struggling to control themselves because their mood is changing constantly. And there is also this passivity might be coming with mood also. So guys, this is a kind of like a short video about retrograde planets. I did not want to kind of speak about what Zelensky should be expecting in the near future and so forth. I might actually make a webinar about that. But what I see is that there are changes coming up for him surely, because Mercury, which is the ruler of his chart, by the way, he has got a Gemini ascendant, as you can see, is going to be shifting out in 6 months' time from Aquarius to Pisces by solar arc. And basically that Mercury from an okay position is going into a detriment or a fall. So I kind of feel like in 6 months' time he's gonna fall. So I'm expecting him having some problems in the political world. Let's put it that way. Okay, and plus Saturn will be transiting his midheaven, so there is going to be a cord around his neck, also by others, probably financial issues, because Saturn does rule his 8th house, but it does rule the 9th house as well. So kind of like political restrictions or foreign restrictions might be actually on the way to him. But anyway, I did not want to make any type of predictions about him because I would need to look at his all his charts and predictive techniques to kind of get a clearer picture. So I just wanted to make quickly a video about retrogrades. Do let me know if you have got retrograde planets, and do let me know if you want to learn more about retrograde planets, because I might put a series together. Thank you, everyone, and see you soon. Bye-bye.